It was evening in a tall apartment building. Outside, the city was alive with noise, movement, and lights. Cars honked on the road. Shops stayed open with bright signs. People hurried home from their long day of work. Inside the building, life was quieter. Behind each door, people lived their separate lives. Families cooked dinner. Children played with toys. Some people watched television. Others sat with their phones or books. On the 5th floor lived Mrs. Lee, an elderly woman. She was kind and gentle, but her evenings were always lonely. Her children lived far away, and her small apartment often felt too quiet. She sometimes stood near the window and whispered to herself, "I wish I had someone to share my tea with." On the 4th floor lived David, a young office worker. Every day he left home early and returned late. He usually opened the door, threw his bag on the chair, and collapsed onto the sofa. His apartment was neat but empty. He often told himself, "I am too tired to talk to anyone. I just need to rest." On the 3rd floor lived Amina, a cheerful mother of 2 children. Her evenings were full of noise, questions, and laughter. Her children, curious and playful, followed her everywhere. She sometimes felt exhausted, but always tried to smile for them. On the 2nd floor lived Luca, a university student. His guitar was his closest friend. He often practiced quietly, strumming gentle melodies. Sometimes he dreamed of performing on a big stage, but in reality, he only played softly to the 4 walls of his small apartment. On the 1st floor lived Mr. Patel, a shopkeeper. His apartment smelled of tea and spices. He was polite to everyone, but rarely spoke more than a few words. After long days in his shop, he usually came home, drank from his metal flask of tea, and sat silently. Though these people lived in the same building, they did not truly know one another. They passed each other in the stairwell or the elevator, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling politely, but never stopping to talk. The evening moved forward as usual. The city outside was still bright, but inside the building, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, click, the lights went out. The televisions turned off, the refrigerators stopped humming, and the building fell into darkness. At first, everyone thought it was temporary. Power cuts were not unusual in the city, but as minutes passed, the darkness stayed. In her 5th floor apartment, Mrs. Lee felt her heart beat faster. The shadows around her seemed larger, and the silence felt heavy. She whispered, "Oh dear, not tonight." On the 4th floor, David groaned. "Just when I wanted to relax. No lights, no TV, no charging for my phone. Great." He dropped onto his sofa, annoyed. On the 3rd floor, Amina hugged her children close. "Don't be afraid. It's only a power cut. The lights will come back soon." But her children's eyes were wide, and they gripped her arms tightly. "Mama, what if they don't?" one of them asked. She stroked their hair and replied gently, "Even if they don't, we still have each other." On the 2nd floor, Luca put his guitar aside. He tried playing in the dark, but his fingers slipped on the strings. He lay back and sighed, staring into the ceiling he could not see. "The dark makes me feel so far away from everything," he thought. On the first floor, Mr. Patel sat quietly with his tea. The darkness did not frighten him. It reminded him of his childhood in his home country, where blackouts were common. In those times, neighbors would come outside with candles and sit together. He closed his eyes, remembering the laughter of those nights. In her apartment, Mrs. Lee searched her drawers with trembling hands. At last, she found a small candle, the only one she had left. "Ah," she said softly, "my last candle." She lit it with a match, and her room filled with a warm golden glow. The shadows danced gently on the walls. Her fear lessened. "Yes," she whispered, "this is better." But then she thought about the rest of the building. Perhaps her neighbors were afraid too. Perhaps they were sitting in the dark just like her. She looked at the flame and smiled. Why should I keep this light only for myself? She picked up the candle carefully, opened her door, and stepped into the hallway. The hall was silent and dark, but now, in her hand, the small flame glowed bravely. One tiny light in all the darkness. On the fourth floor, David noticed a glow under his door. Curious, he opened it slightly and saw Mrs. Lee. "Mrs. Lee, you brought that candle out here?" She smiled warmly. "Yes, David, the hallway needed light, and light should be shared, don't you think?" David hesitated. He usually avoided long conversations, but something about her kindness touched him. He stepped into the hallway. On the third floor, Amina's children saw the glow under their door. "Mama, look, light!" they cried. Amina opened the door and the children ran out, their faces bright with excitement. "It's so pretty," they said, pointing at the flame. Amina smiled at Mrs. Lee. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." One by one, other neighbors peeked out. Faces appeared in the dim glow, curious and a little surprised. At first, the neighbors stood in silence, unsure what to say. They were not used to being together, but the candlelight softened everything. It made the hallway feel less like a place of strangers and more like a room of possibilities. Amina went back to her apartment and returned with a plate of cookies. "I baked these earlier," she said shyly. Her children passed them around, their small hands full of crumbs. David took one and laughed. "This is better than sitting alone in the dark." Luca, encouraged by the friendly mood, brought out his guitar. He strummed a soft melody. The gentle notes filled the hallway. The children clapped along, smiling. Even Mr. Patel appeared, carrying his metal flask. He poured cups of hot tea for everyone, his eyes twinkling as he finally spoke more than a few words. "Tea tastes better when shared," he said simply. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years but had never spoken were now smiling and talking together. Time passed, but no one wanted to leave. They began sharing stories they had never told each other before. Mrs. Lee told them about her childhood in another city. She described sitting with her family during storms, gathered around a lantern, telling stories to chase away the dark. David admitted he often felt too busy and too tired to connect with people. "Sometimes I think my life is just work, home, sleep, repeat," he confessed. His neighbors nodded. They understood. Amina spoke about her children's dreams. "This one wants to be a doctor," she said, hugging her daughter, "and this one says he will be a teacher." Everyone smiled and encouraged the children, who grinned proudly. Luca shared how music helped him when he felt homesick. "Sometimes the guitar is my only friend," he said quietly, "but tonight I don't feel alone." Mr. Patel told stories from his shop about funny customers, kind strangers, and little acts of honesty he had seen. His voice, usually quiet, grew lively as he shared. The candle flickered, but it did not go out. It became the center of their gathering, a symbol of warmth and connection. After a long while, the electricity suddenly came back. The lights flickered on brightly, filling the hallway with white light. For a moment, everyone blinked and looked up at the ceiling. But instead of cheering, they felt a strange sadness. The soft candlelight had felt warmer, more comforting. The bright electric light seemed almost too sharp. Mrs. Lee looked at her neighbors and said softly, "Sometimes one small light is enough to bring people together." Her words stayed in the quiet air. Everyone nodded. That night, the neighbors did not return to their apartments right away. They stayed a little longer, talking and laughing in the newly lit hallway. Before they finally said goodnight, they made a promise. They would meet again, not because of a blackout, but because they wanted to. They would no longer live as strangers behind closed doors. The candle was small, but its light had changed everything. It had turned fear into comfort, loneliness into friendship, and silence into laughter. From that night on, the apartment building no longer felt like a place of strangers. It felt like a home.